It's not bad, mate. Not bad. It's a rather sedate Friday compared to normal weekends. Obviously, the reduced slate has massively impacted on that. And of course, the Friday night deadline, don't get caught out, but that does shift things a little bit. So we, instead of the usual 14, 15 or 16 press conferences on a Friday, we've only had, I think it's 6. So I'm quite enjoying this, like I say, the slow meander through Friday's press conferences as we head towards that early deadline. Yeah, so we've got 3 cancelled fixtures. That Sunday games take in Manchester United and also Leeds, and Chelsea have been cancelled from that. And there was also a third fixture, and this was more about the rivalry between the two clubs and the transport, and obviously the lack of policing with Crystal Palace and Brighton. So we're left with those 7 remaining fixtures. Uh, yeah, that we're not worried about you, Jason. Okay, well, we'll kick off with Bournemouth. Obviously, they're making the long trip up north to St James's Park this weekend. And as some of the members alluded to in the chat box, team news hasn't been great. Managers not really that forthcoming, and particularly, like I say, with some big fixtures, with that reduced slate, and some key players on that cusp of a return wanting to know. But we'll stick with Gary O'Neill first, the interim boss down there at the Vitality. I'm expecting the Cherries to be pretty much unchanged following that 9-0 defeat at Anfield. Scott Parker dismissed, departed, left the club. So Gary O'Neill's come in and have had 2 decent results. The first one being a 0-0 draw and then a come from behind victory over Nottingham Forest. So that suggests to me, like I say, that Gary O'Neill won't be tweaking things too much. The only player that we expect to come back into contention is Junior Stanislas. He spent quite a considerable time on the sidelines due to a groin problem. So in terms of his fitness, he certainly isn't going to be ready for a start. Elsewhere, David Brooks, we know that he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma last year. So he's spent around about 11 months on the sidelines. He's hoping, or he was targeting a potential return for Wales at the World Cup. However, he did play in a development game this week, suffered a minor setback, hamstring related issue. Again, you hope that it isn't too serious, but it's not massively unexpected given the fact that when players are returning from long-term injury, they can quite often pick up soft tissue, muscles, and knocks and niggles along the way. So like I say, a little step back for David Brooks, but it's just great for him to be coming back in contention. I mean, how's things going your end, Jason? Are we back on track or? Just go through the team news as such. Yeah, no problem. The other big talking points, and like I say, we'll go through these alphabetically. And Arsenal, they travel to Brentford, is it this weekend? Tough game on the cards. Now, a couple of disappointing maybe updates in terms of what's come out, particularly from the Ukrainian FA, and that's Zinchenko. He looks to have picked up a calf issue during training. Now, the Ukrainian FA say that he's been ruled out of those upcoming internationals, and they expect the fullback to be out for around about 2 weeks. Mikel Arteta, he had his press conference around about 1 o'clock, and basically he dealt with any questions around team news with a straight bat. He said, look, I'm not going to give you anything until after the final session on Saturday. And that's fair enough. But like I say, we understand that Zinchenko is looks to be out of that game. So we have Kieran Tierney starting there at left back. At right back, I still have Ben White in this team. Now, there seems to be some kind of suggestion or rumour, as it were, that Ben White has picked up a bit of a knock. Certainly nothing confirmed. I've never been told about any of this. So that's why he's in that starting 11. Now, I don't know if this has came about because of his omission from that England squad and Gareth Southgate. That's potentially where these rumours have come from. But like I say, when asked, Mikel Arteta wouldn't disclose anything other than to say that he firmly believes that Ben White, of course, should be in his team, and his versatility makes him an asset to the Three Lions squad, as opposed to maybe holding him back a little bit. Elsewhere, Thomas Partey, he has been involved in full training. We know that he suffered a setback in and around the same region of the thigh that ended his campaign last year. So this is one that Mikel Arteta will want to be very careful with. That's why I've left Xhaka and Lokonga in that central pairing in the centre of the park. I just think it's a little bit too soon for Thomas Partey. You would hope that, you know, he will be included on the bench and maybe get some minutes. Gabriel Jesus, I understand, has been omitted from the Brazil squad. No reason or rationale as to why that's been the case. We hope for Gabriel owners that again, that isn't injury related, and it's more just of a tactical decision and the decision from the Brazilian boss to omit him. Emile Smith-Rowe. We've seen he pulled up during that warm down at Old Trafford and Arsenal's first defeat of the season. Later confirmed that it was a groin-related issue. Now, this is something which I've referenced many a times, and these ongoing muscular problems go back to December 2021. So it's several months and that has hampered him. I think we're only talking about 8 Premier League starts for Emile Smith-Rowe in 2022. So that's a little bit disappointing. And again, this latest setback is a slight worry and a slight concern. And it remains to be seen, you know, when Smith-Rowe will actually be ready and pushing for that back and that Arsenal team, because they're not blessed with a lot of strength and a lot of depth within that department. And certainly, you know, he was one of the few shining lights last season. You know, he really came to the fore. So Arsenal will be looking to get him back into the fray. Aston Villa, they're one of the teams involved on Friday night. Of course, they welcome the Saints to Villa Park. Now, massive issues for Steven Gerrard in the goalkeeping department. However, the caveat is he remained fairly optimistic that Emi Martinez, in the first instance, would be cleared to play. But Thursday morning, Friday night, complained of illness, presented at the club. Doctor gave him some medication and he was sent away. Like I say, we're hoping that Steven Gerrard, 24 hours rest and recovery, will put him back in contention. Now, for all intents and purposes, that wouldn't be so bad. But then number 2 in Robin Olsen also picked up a knock to the knee. Missed Thursday's session and potentially cast a doubt over his availability. Third choice goalkeeper Jed Steer, he's been out long term with an Achilles issue. So that means potentially you'd be looking at the 19-year-old development keeper Marshall, if I recall correctly. So he has been put on standby. It may be that he gets a place on the bench, but like I say, we couldn't completely rule out Martinez, who I think will be, and also Robin Olsen as well. Elsewhere within that squad, Ollie Watkins, he was ill earlier on in the week and he has trained with the squad, but I've actually taken him out of that starting 11. I've went for Danny Ings, and that's purely based on the fact that maybe just that little bit of sharpness, that extra bit of freshness in terms of his training, just puts him slightly ahead of Watkins. And we have seen Steven Gerrard go with 2 up top this season, but you know, they weren't too bad last time out. Decent performance against Manchester City. We've seen the 2 players in behind there in Bailey and Buendia. And of course, the question is, can you shoehorn maybe Coutinho in there? Not for me at the moment. He hasn't been pulling up any trees this season. He's been a little bit disappointing. So that's why we're going for this lineup as it is. At right back, there was no mention from Steven Gerrard of that hamstring-related issue for Matty Cash. But we do know that he's been omitted from the Poland squad. That's going to be a few weeks, and that's why we have Ashley Young in that team. Oh, on to Brentford. How are we doing, Jason? Are we back? Are we back, or are we not back? Yeah, I mean, the Leon Bailey, it's going to be a tough call with that front three, four for Aston Villa because they are fairly interchangeable from Steven Gerrard. And I'm basing this selection, this team lineup, on the nucleus of that Manchester City performance. Ones each. Obviously, Leon Bailey got himself a nice goal as well. So that's why he starts. Is he the type of player that I will be having in my FPL team? Um, we've discussed it many times before. We like starters and I like minutes. He's one of those players who I wouldn't, he's not nailed down week in and week out. And like I say, they're fairly interchangeable. And, particularly around maybe the busy, congested fixture periods, Leon Bailey's one of those players that Steven Gerrard may look to protect given the injury problems since he arrived at Villa Park. So that would be my one concern. If I was to have him, I go in with my eyes wide open and understand that some weeks it's going to work really well and he's going to return, while others, like I say, it may be more just a cameo role from the bench. For Brentford, look, Ivan Toney got his England call-up as Thomas Frank had been champion for, fully deserved. My differential captain, I think, was it back in game week 6. Now it seems like a lifetime ago. And Brentford, as an attacking force this season, have been absolutely fantastic. Again, there's probably 7 or 8 players almost locked down in this Thomas Frank team. And then you maybe have 2 or 3 players who are fairly interchangeable. But again, given the time off that we've had due to the cancellation of last week's schedule, then I'd expect maybe this B's team to revert back to default. The difficulty with Sunday games is teams still have either a 1 or 2 sessions to go. Manchester City, for example, are training on Friday afternoon, whereas others as well may be training on Saturday morning or afternoon. So those starting 11s haven't quite been finalised yet, but there's no massive injury talking points for Brentford. Only Sergio Canos comes into contention for the first time this season. The Spaniard has been managing a hamstring injury. Ethan Pinnock hoping to build up minutes during the international break, a couple of bounce games to maybe put him in contention at some point in October. We talked about the absence of Chelsea and Brighton this weekend and Palace, all of those games off. In Everton, again, a lot of talking points here. We learn ahead of last week that Jordan Pickford picked up a thigh problem in that Merseyside derby. Now, the expectation is the initial timeline was around about 3 to 4 weeks, and that's still probably the case. We heard from Frank Lampard on Friday afternoon, and he said that they're hoping, or there's an outside chance that Pickford may be available for that Southampton game, which will be game week 9. If it isn't, then they'll certainly be looking towards that Manchester United game. Fortunately, in Asmir Begovic, they've got a more than able number 2 who can come in there. Elsewhere within that Toffee squad, you're looking at Dominic Calvert-Lewin, again, back off his latest injury. That was a knee problem. Now, Frank Lampard wouldn't give any kind of definitive answers when he was asked, is he going to start? My own feeling is it's going to be a little bit of a risk to throw Calvert-Lewin straight in there from the start, especially as well when you have the likes of Neil Maupay, the new signing, who can come in and do a job. So for me, Maupay starts with Calvert-Lewin, who will get minutes from the bench. The only other question that you could potentially have within that Everton squad is the return of Abdul Doucouré. Again, he's coming off the back of his own hamstring problem, and you've got Tom Davies. Unana, I think, is probably nailed down in there. Iwobi has done really well since he come into midfield, although you could maybe, if you wanted to freshen things up or tweak the formation, then maybe it would be Iwobi coming out there, maybe pushed high up, or Tom Davies, like I say. But just in terms of that freshness and that sharpness, I'm going to leave that as it is. And again, maybe Doucouré might be a player who is vying for more of a realistic start after the international break. For Fulham, Marco Silva, we've got a Friday night game here. Again, not too much change. The only real sort of major talking point comes at left back. Is that Anthony Robertson rolled his ankle, I think it was against Chelsea. Still not training fully with the squad, or hadn't been up until Wednesday, as the case may be. Now, the injury itself isn't thought to be too severe, and that's why Marco Silva said we're assessing the player on a day-to-day basis. Now, my initial thoughts were maybe Kevin Mbabu comes in on that left-hand side, again, former Newcastle player, or, as I've went with on the predicted lineups, Kurzawa. Hope I haven't absolutely butchered that name. He arrived from Paris Saint-Germain. He wasn't part of the matchday squad last time out, game week 6. That was purely based on the fact that he just didn't have the fitness, hasn't had much of a pre-season to go by. So that's why Marco Silva omitted him from the team. We're now 2 weeks down the line. It's going to be purely comes a question of whether he believes he's fit enough to play at least 50, 60, 70 minutes. If not, I think it will be Mbabu, but I have went for the former PSG fullback. And this one, Leeds, we've got a blank there. Leicester, they will be hoping to get some points on the board. It's a big game for them this weekend. I have Fares starting in defence, and that's been their Achilles heel, not just this season and not just last season, but even a carryover from the season before. And I know Jason's discussed this on many occasions, and in particular, their susceptibility to conceding goals from dead ball situations. This is something that Brendan Rodgers has referenced and something that he's going to be hoping to address. Difficulty, some of the key talking points. I have dropped Soumare out of midfield. I've brought Ndidi back in, and I also have Jamie Vardy back into the fold. Now, he was dropped last time out, but the Foxes were coming off the back of a 3-game week. We all know that the agent Jamie Vardy struggles to play those matches in quick succession. So with Padson Daka and Kelechi Iheanacho, although they did start really well, looked sharp and looked quick, I still think Jamie Vardy is the go-to guy down there at Leicester City, regardless of other performances. And like I say, off the back of this rest, and also, the pressures that they need to perform and get some points, he gets the nod for me. Nothing for Liverpool. Am I right in Liverpool? I have, yeah. Are Liverpool playing? Jason, help us out. No, Liverpool aren't playing. They're playing Chelsea. Yeah, they haven't. That one's cancelled. Yeah. So Manchester City. The Manchester City team news. We heard from Gareth Southgate on Thursday. That included a call-up for Kyle Walker. That offered a little bit of hope and promise that the fullback had recovered from his latest setback. Go back 7 to 10 days, Pep spoke about his squad, and he said, how long will Kyle Walker be? I'm not sure if he'll be back for Wolves or after the international break. As I mentioned before, Manchester City have a training session on Friday afternoon, and any decisions with regards to his involvement will be made then. So I think the decision around Kyle Walker is really a 50-50 call at this point. Like I say, he's on the cusp of a return. It's just whether Pep decides to risk him. I haven't in this particular instance. I've went Ake at left back and went Cancelo on the right-hand side. But, it is very interchangeable, this City team. Always difficult to predict their starting 11 because they've got so many stars in there. I've included Alvarez, but look, you've got the likes of Mahrez, you've got Grealish. I haven't even got Bernardo Silva in there as well. So, this is a difficult one to call. Listen, if I'm wrong, which I undoubtedly will, don't shoot me. United, no game for United. The United of Manchester, but the United of Newcastle. Now, this is a one that I've had lots of questions on my timeline, namely around Alan Saint-Maximin. Now, over the last sort of 10 to 14 days, Saint-Maximin has been recovering from a hamstring problem in Monaco. He returned to Tyneside earlier this week. Now, a lot of the activities that he was doing was still gym-based, working individually, certainly not outside on the grass, and more importantly, not with the group. Now, Friday morning's press conference, Eddie Howe declined to offer any kind of definitive update on any of his injured players, merely just referencing the fact that they're all improving. Now, I have posted out on social media my thoughts on where I see the players in terms of who may or may not be in contention. And that comes at Bruno Guimaraes. Just missed out against Crystal Palace. That was a hamstring problem. He's a player that I can realistically see pushing for a start in that 11. Now, if deemed fit enough, then it probably Longstaff is the player who drops out. It might be a bit of a 50-50 call. I just see his importance to that Newcastle team as massive, and therefore that's why I've brought him straight into the team. For Saint-Maximin, certainly not a start. That's why I have Ryan Fraser there on the left-hand side. For me, it's only a small chance of making that Newcastle bench. And thirdly, the other big call would be the Callum Wilson. My understanding that Wilson was behind those two players in terms of his recovery and his fitness. So therefore, it stands to reason that, he's maybe not going to be included in the matchday squad. And that's why we've got Isak. I think I have pronounced that right. Alexander Isak as starting in that Newcastle team. Once players are fully fit, it'll be interesting to see, by the way, how Eddie Howe does link up if he goes into a 4-4-2 or maybe a 5-3-2. That'll be interesting with that. The other big talking point is the Matty Target stroke Dan Burn debate. Big call. I went Target last time and he did get the nod over Dan Burn, but what a servant he's been to the club since his arrival from Brighton, and he's very unfortunate. So this is a difficult one, and it's not one that sits easy. It really is a coin toss for me. Like I say, just given the performances of Dan Burn since his arrival. For Notts Forest, again, yeah, so the situation with Callum Wilson, like I say, my understanding in it, he was slightly behind the likes of Alan Saint-Maximin and Bruno Guimaraes in terms of his recovery and his fitness. So for me, the arrival is Isak. That eases that pressure and that burden on Eddie Howe to necessarily throw Callum Wilson straight back into that starting lineup, which is why they may use this 2-week international break period, to get some more training in his legs. Now, Callum Wilson himself, he's been working really hard. He's very diligent in terms of his recovery, and he'll be focused on trying to get a place in Gareth Southgate's England squad. Still harbours hope, going to the World Cup in Qatar. But there's going to be a lot of things that come down to that. The form of the players already within that squad now, to include Ivan Toney and obviously Harry Kane. But like I say, how maybe Callum Wilson will be deployed and utilised by Eddie Howe, over those coming game weeks. We just don't know at this moment in time. And like I say, whether he wants to stick with that 3 up front and just go with 1, which would effectively limit game time for either Isak or Wilson, or whether he goes, with a 2 and he changes his formation and his setup completely. Like I say, I don't really see that. Maybe a 4-4-2, or you could go with more like of a 3-5-2 and have the likes of Target as an attacking fullback, and then you could drop Dan Burn back in there. So it's interesting as well, because you also have John Joe Shelvey as well approaching full fitness. He's maybe 3-4 weeks away. So, and Eddie Howe is a big fan of John Joe Shelvey. He certainly offers a lot in terms of what he brings in his passing range and pushing that team forward. So, it's a nice headache to have for Eddie Howe once you get these players back in fit. And, there's no reason why we shouldn't be pushing maybe for a top 10 or potentially even a top 8 finish this season with a decent cup run. Yeah, Forest, look, I've went off I've went off piste a little bit here with Forest. I've been waiting for the arrival of Steve Cooper to deploy Emmanuel Dennis in that strike role, and it's difficult. You've got so many new players coming into the club. You don't really fully understand where they are in terms of their fitness, what they've been doing in pre-season, how many minutes they've had. So that's the difficulty at this stage. What I would say, what we do know is that Nico Williams is that expected to be the first choice on the right-hand side following the arrival of Serge Aurier, the former Tottenham player. However, still hasn't received international clearance. So unless that's happened within the last 24 hours, he won't be in contention. But again, we don't know where he's at in terms of his fitness. We have Kouyaté in there. O'Brien is a player that dropped out, but again, fairly interchangeable. I do expect Cooper to make changes from that last match just because of the disappointment, having led Bournemouth by 2 goals and then ultimately giving that up and losing 3-2. So that was a huge disappointment. And that's why I see, possibly 1 or 2 changes within that starting 11. But there's not much from a fantasy perspective to whet the appetite. For Southampton, they travel to Villa Park. They've only got 2 players sidelined. Tino Livramento, we know, is long-term and won't be back until 2023. And the other one who was attracting interest was Romeo Lavia. That was a hamstring injury. All we know at this point is Ralph Hasenhüttl expects him to be out for a minimum of 6 weeks. So maybe mid to late October at best for the young player. Elsewhere within that team, Gineppo, he's just signed a new 3-year contract on the left-hand side, really high regarded. But in this instance, I have went with Roman Peru, but we have seen those 2 players flip-flop and swap over. I do have Diallo and also Elyounoussi starting. Had this been game week 7, there may have been question marks because they were affected by illness, but they returned to training ahead of, I think it was last Thursday. So they have trained and they've had a full week and there were no sort of further issues with regards to that. Tottenham, lots of talking points here. And I've sort of went out on a limb. And if for those who follow the predicted lineups, know that I'm not really scared to make too many changes. I went with Ryan Sessegnon at the start of the season when everybody was talking about Perisic. I got that call right. Now, we're in the guts of the season. It's a difficult call. Perisic started midweek, and that's why I went with Sessegnon, just with that quick turnaround with the European fixtures. Other players that were maybe looking to change. I got Lenglet, who comes in for Ben Davies. Like you say, Davies came in midweek. In Tottenham, leaving Lisbon with disappointingly with conceding 2 late goals. That's why I've changed that back. And the only other player that I see who could potentially rock the boat, and this comes in attack and also follows on from comments from Antonio Conte midweek when he spoke about rotation, and he spoke about those attackers in particularly who were used to getting game time week in and week out. He wants to change that mindset. He wants to change that philosophy, and he's going to sort of interchange those 4 players accordingly, whether he starts or whether he brings people on the bench, off the bench for 20 or 30 minutes. For me, Harry Kane is that set and forget. And the Kuvaletsky call, I haven't included him in this starting 11, but my own inclination, I was thinking Heung-min Son would drop to the bench. I really was. It would be a big call. The only thing that put us off dropping Son to the bench, I think, was only fact that in the last 2 seasons, I think he's only started on the bench 3 times. So it's not something. He's not a player that is affected by fatigue. He has a high number of minutes in his legs. He's very robust. He's very resilient. Like I say, he plays a high amount of minutes. That's why he got the nod. And I just think the form of Richarlison, since he came into that starting 11 as well, means that he deserves to keep place. So reluctantly, I've left Kuvaletsky out. But like I say, I wouldn't be massively surprised if he did start. West Ham, They played in the Europa Conference League on Thursday night. We've seen the return of Aaron Cresswell and also Craig Dawson. Cresswell had been managing a little bit of a groin issue, and that's why I've left him out of that starting 11. Again, due to that quick turnaround, something which, you've got to be managing very, very carefully. We heard from David Moyes, actually one of the earliest press conferences we've had, certainly this season, that was scheduled for 8:15 this morning. So in terms of where the players are, recovery, picking up knocks, those being assessed from the game in Silkeborg, that's, he hadn't even had those conversations with the medical department and the backroom staff. So again, we're having to read between the lines. There are a couple of players who are fairly interchangeable within this. We've got Skamaka, who has started a few games and scored on Thursday evening, and also Ben Rama as well. But this is what I've went with for now. Like I say, the Cresswell issue and also the Craig Dawson, I'm sticking with Kedra and also Zuma for that one. But those two players certainly aren't too far away from being back up to full fitness. So that may be after the international break when they're fully fit and ready. And finally, we just had some very, very late news just before we came live on air from Bruno Lage. And we had been expecting Raul Jimenez to lead that line for Wolves this weekend. He was pulled out of the starting lineup in game week 6 due to what Bruno Lage initially referenced as chronic fatigue. Again, he missed a section of pre-season. He coming off the back of that 3-game week, and he said he just felt a little bit discomfort. I later learned that's a bit of a groin issue, and it is more than fatigue related because he still isn't with the squad. Now, you have people questioning, who could potentially come in there. The new signing, Kaladzniks. And now I think, I haven't got that right. But that's a ruptured ACL. And while, we're certainly not expecting him to return this year, and maybe there's question marks whether he'll return this season. The other new addition to the squad, of course, is Diego Costa. I think that was officially revealed on maybe Tuesday. Now, the only concerns that I have here are that Diego Costa hasn't played a competitive game since December 2021. Now, he looks to be in fairly decent nick, but of course, this is the Premier League, and this is about, that freshness and that sharpness. So I've went with Daniel Pedence. When asked if Costa would be in the squad, Bruno Lage, again, deadpan, let's see. You'll find out once the team news has been released. But it's certainly, I say, minutes from the bench for Costa for the foreseeable future, unless, of course, circumstances dictate otherwise in terms of injuries and availability. But in the ideal situation, Diego Costa probably won't be pushing for a start maybe in the Premier League until maybe game week 11, possibly game week 12 and onwards. Yeah, oh, well, so that's it. I mean, this is our first sort of live injury news stroke predicted lineups through team selections. It hasn't been without hitch, but look, you have to roll with the punches sometimes when you're going live. Hope you enjoyed it. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat, Jason, that I need to address before we bow out. Yeah, so I mean, if you're just catching up with the stream now, you may be seeing Jason's face, but not hearing anything. We have audio issues, so we're not really sure what's going on there. But look, hey ho, I've enjoyed it. I'm a pretty hoarse. I need a good drink after this one. We are approaching 3 hours, just over 3.5 hours until the deadline. So like I said, do not get caught out with that. If you do access the Fantasy Hub website, this is a working document. So even though we're discussing this now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of these lineups and all of the team news are locked in as it stands. We literally jumped on this stream within minutes of that final press conference. So there's still updates to be had, which is why maybe it will differ over the coming hours. But like we say, I hope you enjoyed it. You know where to get us. Yeah, Kyle Walker, very close. touch and go, obviously included in that England squad. Manchester City have a session this afternoon. Pep Guardiola will make his decision based on that. Because there are no guarantees at this point, that's why I haven't included Kyle Walker in my predicted lineup. Yeah, so Jason, audio issues to reiterate, and we've literally went through this week's fixtures in alphabetical order because of those audio issues. So if you're just tuning in a little bit late, or you want news on specific players, like I say, you can go through those team by team of everybody that's playing this weekend. I'm hoping to pick up maybe one or two questions now that I can actually hear, Jason. It's not coming out your end. So Jason is relaying questions to me. And like I said, hopefully we'll do our best to answer as many as we possibly can. Jason, why would anybody not want to choose Erling Haaland at this moment in time? I think I looked at every single performance attacking metric. Erling Haaland ranked as number one. The only one, this was something which came out this morning, and you may or may not have seen that yourself. So you can look at shots in the box and number of goals and XGI and everything like that. You know, he's in that top three, he's in that top two. In terms of overall touches this season, I don't know if you've seen this, Jason. Would you like to hazard a guess where Erling Haaland ranks in terms of the Premier League for touches of the ball this season? He's ranked, Erling Haaland is ranked at 236th in the Premier League for touches. Yeah, so, you know, to give a little bit, who was it? To contextualize, I think somebody used it as a comparison of Conor Gallagher, who's been involved in, I think, 5 games, played maybe almost three times as, I think he's played more minutes. And yeah, he's had something like 400 more touches or something along those lines. So his touch per goal ratio is absolutely ridiculous. You know, this guy, dare I say, will go on to break records this season. And if you keep him fit and he stays in the Premier League, you know, he's going to be an absolute legend. So, you know, he's the latest in the long line of great strikers that we've welcomed to the Premier League, and he certainly hasn't disappointed, continues to deliver. Great goal midweek, full of confidence. You know what, the guy absolutely knows where that onion bag is. Yeah, yeah, would I go Perisic? Look, this is conversations that we've had since before the season started, and I'm still really no further forward in terms of being able to maybe nail down those Tottenham fullbacks. Potentially, you know, I might look to Emerson, but certainly not Perisic. I see him as a risk with Sessegnon. Sessegnon is very highly rated by Antonio Conte, and when it comes to those European fixtures, and when it comes to the fact that, you know, Perisic, I know, regardless of his age, is a very resilient player who kind of have a high minute, you know, high load in his legs. Coming off the back of European fixtures, I think Conte, you know, I wouldn't guarantee a start for Perisic. So for me, I'd probably look to downgrade from that and keep a little bit of money in the bank. I wouldn't want to be putting all my eggs in one basket with Perisic. Like I say, I think there are other options elsewhere. Kieran Trippier, you know, stick with the black and whites. On dead ball situations, on free kicks. Newcastle looking pretty solid at the back. I think he's a great option. Yeah. Yeah, Salah versus De Bruyne debate. I mean, Liverpool generally, you're expecting them to bang. You're expecting them to explode at one point. They're not a bad team overnight. Yes, the demands and the physicality of fighting on four fronts last season, maybe coming home to roost. There are a lot of injuries within that squad, and that's limiting Jurgen Klopp in terms of being able to rotate and ultimately getting some of his best players out there. And they're struggling. There's a little bit of maybe a crisis of confidence, but hopefully, that late win during the week can be used as a bit of a stepping board to transfer that confidence into the Premier League and really kick on. But between the two at this moment in time, it's got to be De Bruyne. You would think he has had a bit of a rest in terms of his minutes in recent times. That would be, long term. That would be the only thing, because inherently if Salah is fit, he starts for Liverpool. He does play a high note, whereas Pep isn't frightened to drop De Bruyne. But for now, I just think the form of City and the form of Kevin De Bruyne mean that he gets a nod just for me. Oof. So Isaac for captain, or Isaac. Isaac, I'm sure I'm reliably informed. This look, everybody on Tyneside, all of my friends, everybody I speak to, I'm doing the last man standing competition in Killer, and over 50% of everybody in that are going Newcastle this weekend. I actually think it'll be a tough game, not as maybe that walk in the park that we seem to think it will be. Like Gary O'Neill has certainly showed things up at the back, and they've got a little bit of confidence, obviously, after that heavy defeat by Liverpool. So that said, Isaac would not be my captain. I'm looking at those supply lines. If Bruno Gomes starts, then I think potentially, you've got that creative edge in the middle of the park that can, that will really benefit Isaac. Even if he does, he has missed the last couple of weeks, so there may be a little bit of concerns regarding to that sharpness and just playing himself back into the game. I think there are better options this week in terms of captaincy. I do like Isaac, and I would cherry pick those fixtures, but I just think for me, the Newcastle this weekend, this will be purely about getting 3 points, and if we have to do it, in a nasty or a dirty way, which isn't very flattering on the eye, and just grind something out with maybe a 1-0 or even a 2-1. I think Eddie Howe would take that, in the beat of a heart going into that international break. Yeah, so thanks, Jason. And again, if you're seeing Jason but you're not hearing him, we have audio problems. That's live on the live stream, so apologies for that. But Jason is just relaying information through here as we speak. Top captaincy choices for this week. Number 1, Erling Haaland. No major surprises there. I've actually forgot who's number 2. Did you see Harry Kane? Did you see Harry? Yes, Harry Kane at number 2. I should have got that. I'll own both Haaland and Kane, by the way. In number 3, Alexander Mitrovic. But it's a Friday night game. They're playing away at Forest. I expect Forest to, Steve Cooper to have his boys pumped up, fired up after that home defeat at Bournemouth. So Mitrovic would be a worry for me. But with regards to, it's Haaland to stand out. Again, the Tottenham game against Brentford. No, it's not. Tottenham game against Leicester. That could be a good one. But Brendan Rodgers surely at some point is going to turn things around. And the addition of Forest in the back four, we'll hope to maybe solidify things and ease that XG conceded rate. Yeah, so that's it, guys. That's our first live Friday predicted lineup / injury / team news feed. Not without issues, but I hope you